This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs the Playbook. I am so excited because I love this show and this person, Elise Loehnen. She is the Chief Content Officer at Goop. And if you haven't seen Goop, you got to check it out. It's on Netflix, I believe. As I know, so many channels going through my head now that I'm stuck at home. Anyway, I thought it would be from one of my favorite shows with the best content to be great to have a Chief Content Officer on to talk about the journey, how you get into that position of a chief content officer, and then talk about the importance of content today with everything going on. So I know you grew up in one of my favorite places in Montana.
Yes, the best place on earth.
Not much TV
Now,
there, though.
It's true. My parents were wise. We didn't have cable, and they put our TV in the darkest, coldest room in the house, and they forced us outside. So ironic, of course, that I now live in Los Angeles and I'm on a TV show, and I'm desperate to go. I'm like, why am I not living in the wilds of Montana right now as a survivalist? That seems like a better option.
Yeah, I've had the same thoughts as I'm scurrying back and forth and from the city into hopefully safer quarters. Now, how did you evolve? You know, it's real fun. We're in small towns. I have entrepreneurs in all types of small counties and towns around America. You know, you're in the big time. You're with the biggest stars, with the great show. And, you know, how do you create a career living in Montana to build a career on content when you barely watch TV?
Well, I grew up reading a lot, that's for sure, and reading magazines. And so after college, my brother actually became a book editor. I almost followed him, but I went into magazines, and I worked at Condé Nast for almost 10 years and learned a ton. I worked at a handful of different titles, and it was just sort of an incredible place to refine my voice and to understand what people wanted and what those expectations were and how to be of service. And I always was in service journalism, which is different than sort of a long form reporting or anything that's more, glamorous. And so I left Condé Nast about 10 years ago because we struggled online, and Condé Nast still struggles online. And I moved to Los Angeles to do a very unglamorous job, but to learn about the internet at scale. And I was there at a company called Shopzilla. It's now called Complexities. And I figured, you know, when you're evaluating any opportunity, the things that you consider, right, are your overall comp package, equity, if that's available, and then brand, and whether it will brand, and then the fourth thing, which I think is often most important, education. So for me, I'd worked at big brands, and I needed an education, and so going to Connexity was a little bit like going to grad school, and became the thing that I prioritized more than everything else. And then I met Gwyneth. I had always been I'd ghostwritten books on the side, and I started working with her business partner. What she owns part of Tracy Anderson, and which is a fitness brand. And so I started working with Tracy, and I started working with Tracy, working with Gwyneth. And when she moved from London to Los Angeles, I joined her. And at that point, Goop, which is, as you mentioned, now a Netflix TV show, we have a podcast, we have a site, newsletters, we have a book imprint, every type of content I've tried. So hit me up with any questions. But it felt like coming home and going back to a brand, and the perfect marriage of service content with sort of a long leash in allowing us to explore things that she sort of when she first created Goop, it was a lifestyle brand, and obviously that word gets thrown around a lot, but it is gave her permission, and she's someone who doesn't ask for permission ever, which is one of the reasons that I love her so much. She just goes for it. But she always, from the first newsletter that she sent us, talked about anything that she's curious about or interested in. And so the last 7 years I've been at Goop, we've been expanding our content and the service part of it, and then as you mentioned, we finally got to a place where we could go out and pitch a show and have it come to small screens everywhere and do hard topics. And that's been, as you mentioned, content. We've always been content led. It's allowed us to talk about anything and build a business around that.
So quality content is so important. And what I love about the evolution of Goop and the content at Goop is that, one of the strategies that I teach for just brands is to capture, amplify, and perpetuate. And but don't lose sight of who you are. You told me that Gwyneth is someone that is just who she is, and she has her frequency, not trying to reach everyone. I always say, if you want your content to reach everyone, just make it a shit show. Everybody likes a train wreck. That's why Tiger King does well. That's why the Kardashians do well. It's obvious and easy. And I play in the same realm at a higher frequency, which is why I think I enjoy Goop so much. What are some of the tricks of the trade? Because I think building a brand, either personally, because of micro communities, I forget micro influencers. I believe the real context is micro communities. That I'm so old that I used to get excited when I'd stand on a stage at a corporate event, and they'd pay me to speak in front of 200 executives. I'd come home to my wife and go, I can't believe I get paid to do this. And now millions of people watch me every day. And it's like, boom. But I still know there's value to the micro community. What are some of the tricks of the trade as a content expert that, these more micro mom and pop shops, smaller businesses, individual people that, paint nails and could have a nice little community that, 1,000 people that would watch them, that they can monetize in an area. What are some of those tricks and trades for them?
Yeah, that's a sort of a profound question. And I think so important now as we see what's sort of happening in the world at this moment in time. So yes, at a very early age. So for greater context, when I left Condé Nast, this is about 7 or 8 years ago, and there was a just surge of online digital sites and content. And at that point, it was very much a scale play for most people. It was as many eyeballs as possible. And that always felt wrong to me and wrong to Gwyneth, that we weren't trying to be everything for everyone. We wanted to be distinct. We wanted to take our time creating content and not feel compelled to turn Goop into a content farm and just pump out, SEO chasing headlines and trying to grab every potential eyeball on the internet. We knew that it might, by gaming algorithms. And at that point, it was easier to do that on Facebook. And there were other sites around us that were doing that and getting huge numbers. It felt like the bottom was going to fall out there, and that it was a race to the bottom, and that we always knew it was a quality game over quantity, and that we would survive and thrive if we connected with people in a meaningful way and became one of the brands and that they turn to and that they want to support. And so it's been interesting. It's still so early days in terms of what's happening with COVID. But when I think about my own life, and I see this reflected in the business, and I think it's essential for all the small businesses out there that are really struggling. When you are part of someone's life in a meaningful way, like if you're the nail salon that people convene at with their best friends, and it's in their relationship building and ritual, people are gonna want to ensure your survival. And I'm thinking about that now as I'm making lists of all of the places, the mom and pops and the independent bookstores and the guy who cuts my hair, like all the people who enrich my life. And I think we're at that. We're the days of reading a story and not knowing where you are on the internet are going to be over. People want to understand who's on the other side. And so I think we're going to see just the middle fallout of like things that aren't that meaningful, that aren't that resonant, that aren't memorable. It's just, there's no appetite for that anymore. And I think we'll continue to have the big guys, and then we'll have the businesses that are adding to the world and making it, more meaningful.
Yeah, and I think your content does that. I'm a huge student of Dr. Wayne Dyer, and the thing of change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And every time before I see an episode, either the podcast or the show, I always tell my wife, I go, what I love about this is I see things differently when it's done. And I think that's what's happening now. Change doesn't happen outside of us, it happens within us. And your show changes people within, because someone like Gwyneth and you, with your credibility, will sit there and experiment and illustrate and illuminate things that other people wouldn't believe. I trace calligraphies. I'm one of the most notable sports agents in the world that literally, has had mind, body, soul transmissions, and John Amaral, and when, the Hoff method, and all the guys in strength, happiness, and health. And I just see things differently, and accepting in quantum healing, theta energy, but without people like you that, and this is where the transcoders I call, because I like to sit into the space of transcoding a higher frequency to a lower vibration so that others can experiment and change. Because you can't tell somebody that's depressed and suicidal, just look at the world with a glass half full. And I see people try to make that leap, and Goop doesn't do that. They say, look, here's some really wacky woo-woo stuff, and yet let's take baby steps in it. Like, let's take these normal people, whether they're screaming or orgasming them, or, in pain or whatever they do, but it makes it real that, my two rules of woo-woo are, one, is there any risk? And two, does it work for me?
Yeah.
And your content does that. It's like, hey, there's no risk to this. Try this out. Here, we're showing you people trying it out. And if it works for you, maybe you'll be happier, healthier, and stronger.
Yeah.
And this is a time of unification. And love the virus that you create, which is happiness. It's shared by witnessing. It's the only virus that we share just by witnessing, and it strengthens our immune system. Through all the cool content that you're doing, the question I'm leading up to so slowly, I think, what's the number one overall kind of arching lesson from, the days of Condé Nast and the startup experiential, MBA in a day type of situation, to this overwhelming enlightenment? There has to be like a common theme or a lesson that keeps coming to you throughout the process.
Honestly, I think it's sort of what you just said. It's this moment of resonance. It's like finding those moments of resonance. And we always talk about that at Goop. Like, we're not trying to get people to make over their, it's not about sweeping change. It's not about like prescriptions or subscribe to this belief. It is like those small moments of resonance of like, like maybe that would change like a different perspective on my relationship with my mother, or like, why am I so triggered by that person? Or it's like just paying attention. And as you say, a lot of it is embodied, it's one of those things where you're like, that feels good to me, and it feels true and right, or it feels wrong. And I feel like that's what we try to go for. And by sharing sort of the things that we found interesting or resonant, we find that other people have a similar experience. And I think it relates with anything that you do in the context of business. It's like, go for the thing that's like, like, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be small, but it's like that moment of happiness, or that moment of transparency, clarity, service, whatever. It's small. These things are small. It's not about putting forward a worldview that's like, expect someone to revolutionize their life in a day. It's the small wins.
And those small wins are needed today, as you're sitting in your backyard and I'm sitting in front of this TV in my room. But there's a blend of faith and money right now. Culture and cash, values and money, two currencies, objects of energies that we put into the flow. You've experienced both sides, as I have, in this journey. And I think never before do entrepreneurs need to understand that we have a new beginning. And that whether you're an individual employee of a company, or a business owner, small business owner, or CEO of the biggest company in the world, this is a new beginning. And you have experienced the spectrum of business. What are some of the things that we should focus in on in these uncertain times, compressed time, that you would advise people, okay, here's a new beginning. This is the things I'd focus in on today.
Yeah. Well, uncertainty is a bitch, right? Like, it's terrifying. And
I'm quoting her on that. We got something for TikTok. Uncertainty is a bitch. I got it. Cut
And,
that out.
and we are in the height of uncertainty on every single level. It's like, will we physically survive? Is this death for many of us, death of loved ones? Will our relationships survive? Will our businesses survive? Will our paychecks survive? It is like an incredible moment where we've all, been clinging to the status quo. We've built this incredibly huge economy, and our fingers are being sort of pried off one by one by one as we drop into this abyss, which sounds terrifying, but it's also an incredible gift. And I think that the antidote to uncertainty is to have those hard conversations with yourself and sort of go take it to worst possible scenario. And in that process, sort of like face down your fears, because I think then that allows room for change. And then, so I think that happens in all ways. It's, are you prepared in the eventuality of your death? It might be in 50 years. Do you know what you need and what your sort of basic needs and wants actually are? Have you ever articulated it? Or are you just operating in a place of fear and scarcity and feeling like you're going to lose everything and you'll never have enough? Like, it's like actually taking the time, I think, to write this stuff down and articulate it for yourself and the universe and the divine, and give yourself some certainty. And even if you can't, if it's feels out of reach, I think that there's an incredible power alone in articulating it, because we don't do that work. I haven't done that work personally, and I'm in the midst of doing it during this period. And I think it brings calming reassurance, and I think it gives you an actual playbook. I also feel like, the chrysalis of this is that we're seeing a clarity of purpose around business and a clarity of purpose around life, and people are going to come back, even if their jobs might be intact, and say, this is not in alignment with my values. And so I think it's a time for us to sort of slough off those things that we've taken for granted or just accepted as they need to be because this is how they've been. And in our business, and I'm sure in businesses all over the country, we're doing the work of like, who are we? And who are we in this moment in time? And who do we want to be? And where are some of the places where we've gotten soft and complacent and comfortable that we need to shed? And like, what are we being called to do? And I think now is the time to do that work before we go back to the grind.
That's awesome. Just to finish up, there's 4 things that I believe create certainty. And those are the 4 things that we control ourselves, right? When we feel as if we control things, we have that certainty. And so I just want to rapid fire 4 quick things of your perspective of what your 4 controls are in context to what I'm talking about to finish up. 1, we can control our mindset. So Elise, what's your mindset in this circumstance today?
I'm choosing optimism and belief that we'll get through this and we'll be better for it, stronger for it, hopefully more united for it. And that it's going to be hard and uncomfortable, but that we can do it. We can do those hard things.
Smile through the struggle. All right. Number 2, we are in control of what we say and what we hear. How are you controlling? It's obvious you control what you say, but more importantly, how are you controlling what rhetoric you're listening to?
So I've winnowed down my news sources. I just don't see any point in getting extremely steamed or pissed in this moment in time. So I'm only checking the news twice a day, beginning of the day, end of the day, and trying to not like spike my cortisol unnecessarily.
Yeah, seek the information you want. Don't let it pour onto you.
Yes.
The third thing that I believe we can control is our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And your content has a lot to do about emotions, energy, emotion, those feelings. What are you doing to control your feelings?
I'm honoring them. So I think, and the way that I do that is primarily because I now, based on a lot of the things I've done at Goop, I feel very connected to my body in a way that I don't think I was for the first 8 years of my life. And so when I feel that chest anxiety, I sit with it and I actually ask it questions, or the pit in my stomach. And I just allow myself, I name the emotion and identify it and then look at what is underneath it. And I just don't think like suppressing them does anything. And then I'm just trying to move and get it out of my body.
You know, I find so interesting when you said chest anxiety is that everybody feels anxiety different place. I, I've never felt anxiety in my chest until there was a virus that attacks my chest. And now for the first time, I'm feeling anxiety in my chest going, you know, like, and I've had
Where
so many,
anxiety?
yeah, in my stomach.
Uh,
Yeah, it's my main thing. Many
yeah.
years of studying, but I've learned to get back to center quickly. Last thing that we can control is our actions. Uh,
Mm.
and what activity are you controlling to help accelerate and grow during this period?
Writing stuff down, like really getting clear. I've been carrying a journal around. I write things as they come in passing. I've put time in my calendar to really think about things and actually write them down. And again, it's like I'm doing going through my trust, making sure my beneficiaries are aligned. I mean, silly thing, stuff that's essential and important. But all of that work of just like feeling like I have some control, but just creating clarity around where I am at this moment in space and time.
Yeah, I love that you're taking inventory, and I really appreciate the time. There's some great insight on your playbook to success, happiness, strength, and most importantly, health. If anyone hasn't checked out Goop's content, do so. I'm a huge fan myself. I've learned so much and I've changed the way that I look at things. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're amazing. Elise Loehnen, with Chief Content Officer of Goop, with Dave Meltzer, Entrepreneurs, the Playbook.